Just hit the request. You're now recording.
We're waiting a moment till light comes on. Okay, the lights come on. We have 3 people that signed in from the public today, and someone who put a quote-unquote petition on the desk. I would suggest that this is an inappropriate place for the petition. We have taken a position on Tom already. The position now rests with the selectmen. You must direct yourselves to the selectmen. I'm not going to participate in any conversation about Tom in this meeting. All right? If you discussed it beforehand, yes.
Okay, so we started the meeting. I'm sorry, I thought you said we were waiting.
This is the beginning of the meeting for the Mashpee Board of Sewer Commissioners, Thursday, August 25th, at the Orcoit Meeting Room. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to ask for a personal moment of silence for those people that need our help. All right. On the public participation, I've just dealt with the idea of the Sewer Commission's reevaluation of Tom Fadala. What was the other public sign up for?
I made comments at the select board meeting this Monday before coming to you because your meeting was after their meeting. I'd like to make the same comments.
What do you want to do?
I'd like to give you my comment that I made at the select board meeting.
What is the subject nature of your comments?
Phase 2. Phase 2 of the sewer.
Can you wait till you discover what they are?
Can we have public comment?
Can I make my comments? I watched the meeting just on August 4th where Mr. Jackson.
I'd like to help you get a better perspective. You will have an engineering perspective if you allow us to make a formal presentation today. Then you'll understand where we're going, and we would welcome your comments. You're not a licensed engineer that's driving the program.
It has nothing to do with being an engineer. It has everything to do
Well,
with.
what is your nature of your comments?
Just go up and say it.
Is this working? It is. Hi, my name is Susan Dangle. I am at 762 Cotuit Road. I am the president of the Mashpee-Wakeby Pond Alliance. And I spoke to the select board on Monday because in reviewing the October town meeting warrant, I realized that the article authorizing funds for the design of the town's Phase 2 sewer were missing. Last April, when the board delayed the article, verbal comments were made to include it for consideration in October. As I understand that the planning board will be bringing additional articles, and they did, for consideration that evening, I felt that I needed to bring one as well. That article would meet the expectation that they gave us last April. The text of the article is as follows: to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to expend a sum not to exceed $350,000 from the American Rescue Plan Act local funds for the purpose of preliminary design and production of a construction cost estimate for Phase 2, whatever that may be. The scope of said Phase 2 to be determined by the select board upon consultation with the Sewer Commission or take any other action thereon. As I have come to understand, design is not eligible for state revolving fund loan, so we should use the ARPA cash to avoid having to borrow for this on the town's credit. As a side note, I also learned while attending the Assembly of Delegates last week that only 6 of 15 towns on the Cape have applied for additional county ARPA money, as we did, and that one town is back with a second request for funds, so there's another opportunity for funding. On August 4th, I watched the Sewer Commission meeting where the interim town engineer, Ray Jack, presented a revised Phase 2 map, and this article will give the board the funds to do a preliminary design when it settles on the study scope, which you're going to do, without having to wait until the spring. While a delay to May appears short, it will most likely result in missing another full year of state revolving fund of eligibility, because without the design complete to a point where cost estimates can be provided for planning and construction, the town would likely miss the August 2023 application deadline for SRF funds, which would push us all the way for another year. We all know the estuaries, bays, and ponds are getting worse. We know we need to act now. We know sewering is the critical solution. We need these funds approved so we can keep things moving forward, even as we learn about the specific needs of each water body. The DEP's presentation on July 11th made it very clear that pressure is on towns is coming. We have the ability and the desire to press that accelerator, as Mr. Collins likes to say, and stay on track. Clearly, I've learned over the last year that projects of this size and scope have many moving parts and delays are inevitable. That said, design is the phase of the project that takes the most time. We need to begin the design of phase 2 as soon as possible, even without all of the answers, or we will exponentially delay our wastewater efforts at a time when the pressure builds and our waters are screaming for help. Thank you.
Thank you for having public comment. My name is Lynn Barbie. I live on Surf Drive. I am one of the people who has been involved with this petition that you have in front of you. As public comment, I believe it's my right to speak to it. As a matter of respect to the Sewer Commission, we wanted you to understand that we want your support for this to reappoint Tom Fudala to the Sewer Commission, and that we will be taking it to the Select Board. You have the wording in front of you. We, the undersigned residents of Mashpee, call on the Sewer Commission and the Select Board to reappoint Tom Fudala to the Sewer Commission. Tom has devoted his career to preserving Mashpee's open space and developing a wastewater sewer plan for the town, and is highly competent and qualified to contribute positively to the Commission. Mashpee faces the daunting problem of cleaning up our waters as soon as possible. We need an expert like Tom who will work with the Sewer Commission in the best interests of the people of Mashpee to get the job done. As the architect of our current and state-approved sewer system plan, Tom Fudala's expertise is needed on the Sewer Commission as Phase 1 goes forward and planning for Phase 2 begins. We call on the Sewer Commission to reconfirm their support for Tom and for the Select Board to reappoint Tom to the Sewer Commission as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right, we're going to proceed to old business. Ray Jack has brought our engineering force to the party today. So Ray, would you get up and give us a summary of what's going on?
Not the rules and regulations first, right?
We can do it any way you want. Rules and regs are fine. I would make the motion or ask the members of the board to accept your, what would we call them, corrections to the text and the language in the draft document. I would ask that we,
I so move.
I second.
any discussion on his corrections to the document?
Not discussion, but I do have just a couple of questions. So if we just take a look at page 15. In section 14, there's a statement that Mashpee will designate a private inspector as town inspector who shall represent the interests of the town in Mashpee during construction of the sanitary sewer extension. So is an inspector already identified, or this is what's going to happen in time?
What page are you specifically?
I'm sorry, page 15, section 14 of your revised rules and regs.
What's the nature of your question on paragraph?
My question is whether or not an inspector has been identified or how this person will be identified.
No, the inspector for these has not been identified, but they would be someone who would be contracted for that purpose on an individual inspection, and the homeowner usually has to pay the cost of that inspectional service.
Okay.
Plumbing inspectors are qualified for that, but you generally have to hire someone for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
All those in favor of accepting the revision notes, say aye.
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 Those opposed? You're all set, Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now we're the update on contract status, yes?
Yes, please.
Before I begin, Mr. Chairman, what I would like to do is introduce your team to you. They're here today.
Yep.
This is your engineering team. We have 3 engineering firms represented. These are the principals for those firms. So we have Sandy Tripp representing GHD, Mike Scipione representing Weston & Sampson, they're the OPM. Paul Millett is representing EPG, or Environmental Partners Group, and they were the ones that are going to be doing contract administration on the collection system contracts. GHD is the design engineer for the project, and they're going to be serving as the contract administrator for the main plant. And Weston & Sampson will serve as the owner's project manager on the main plant. But they're here today to answer any questions you may have, and for future reference, on a monthly basis, they will be available, they and/or their representative, to give you monthly updates as contracts progress, be able to answer any questions that you may have at that time too. All right? So, thank you. Okay, in July and August, we proceeded to bid 3 contracts. Contract 1, which is the Water Resource Recovery Facility. That is the wastewater plant that is to be located at the transfer station site. Contract 2 was the collection system north of Route 28, going up along Carlton and Asher's Path, in the vicinity surrounding the transfer station. Contract 3 is the collection system south of Route 28 between Orchard and Quiniquisette, and going all the way down to Yardham. So those are the 3 contracts that we had bid. We've successfully received appropriate bids for all 3 contracts. One of them, specifically for the Water Resource Recovery Facility, came in somewhat high. It was approximately $8 million, more than what the anticipated amount was. I am not that surprised, given the current inflation that we're experiencing, as well as the supply chain issues. And please understand, from a supply chain issue perspective, a plant, wastewater plant, any of them, have a lot of moving parts, okay? A lot of motors, pumps, different types of feed systems, what have you, processes, and those parts come from everywhere. And so getting those parts and getting them when they need them as a contractor isn't always the easiest thing, even under good circumstances. So I can certainly see how that can impact the project overall and give their concerns. So what we did is, the first thing that has to be done is canvass of bids. So all of the bids are evaluated. They're checked very carefully for any errors in math, and understanding that the individuals who are bidding, the companies that are bidding on these contracts, have satisfied all of the minimum requirements that are necessary in order to effect a bid. That makes them a responsive bidder. It's literally a checklist of things that they must submit with their bid in order to be considered responsive. And then, of course, the question of responsible. Responsible just means qualified. And late last year, early this year, for the treatment plant, under Chapter 149, which is state law governing those types of contracts for vertical construction, it's a mandate that we have to pre-qualify general contractors and sub-bidders. There are 9 subcategories for this contract. A equal things like masonry, metalwork, plumbing, things like that. So there were 9 categories of that. We received the sub-bids first as part of the process, and then we evaluate them, we submit them to the contractors that are general contractors on a pre-approved list. The general contractor then makes his selection of these sub-bidders that they want to work with, and then they finally submit their bid. So the last bid that we had received would have been the GC's bid, which was August 11th, all right? It was the final bid that we received. As a result of that, we compiled information in order to be able to determine what we can and cannot do. So I'm gonna run a few numbers off for you first. The actual funding amount that we have from DEP, SRF, which is Department of Environmental Protection, State Revolving Fund Program, that's where the town gets its loan from, was for $54 million. So then there's engineering costs, police details, other things that come out of that amount. So the remaining funds would have been about $45,497,000. That's what we have available when we're considering the award of contracts. The base bid contracts for all 3 of these contracts, base bid meaning that for contract 1, there were 12 alternates. There's a base bid plus 12 alternates. Contract 2 was a base bid with 1 alternate. Contract 3 was a base bid with 5 alternates. So the base bid amounts without any of the alternates totaled $41,472,000. Then we have to add a 5% contingency on that for the duration of the contract because that facilitates any unforeseen obstacles or issues and potential change orders. So that totals up to $43,546,000. Subtract that from the $45,497,000, and we have a balance of $1,950. So what that means is that we can successfully award all 3 contracts, which is really very good, because if this came in a couple million more, just looking at that number, $1,950,000, between all 3 contracts, if that value had gone up $2 million more, something would have to go, a big sacrifice, meaning one of these contracts would have to go, because we wouldn't be able to award at the base bid level. So it's actually, it's good and it's bad. We just can't award a lot of the alternates. So the recommended option for the commission at this point would be to award the base contracts for all 3 contracts. And then for contract 1, the first alternate on that list is a carbon scrubber. Carbon scrubber is the backup odor control system for the plant. The original or permanent odor control system is a biological type of system. It doesn't mean that it can't fail, but if it's ever down for maintenance and/or component failure, this is the backup system. The facility's being built in a residential neighborhood. In my opinion, that's probably the #1 most critical item that is necessary. Any odors from that plant as a result of this are not going to play out very well. Then we have under the alternates for contract 1, of which there were 12. The first one was the carbon scrubber. Second one is process tanks 2.1 and 2.2. And then our alternative 3 was process tanks 3.1, 3.2, 4.1, and 4.2. So we're starting out with 2 tanks. And these tanks are underground tanks, constructed of concrete. That's where the plant's capacity is coming from. So the first 2 sets of tanks give the plant a capacity of 120,000 gallons a day. Another set of 2 adds another 120. Another set of 2, another 120. So the way the contract was broken out here has the base 2 tanks within the base bid. Alternate 2 allows us to put in 2 more tanks. Alternate 3 would allow all of the tanks to go in. Funding-wise, however, there's insufficient money to do that. Just on the alternate 2 for 2 of the tanks, $911,000. Alternate 3, $1.6 million. The 2 of them combined are over 2.5. So all we have available is 1.950 as far as bid award goes. So we can't do both. But we can get the scrubber in and we can get alternate 1, which is the second set of tanks. Contract 3, alternate 1 was wet well coatings, and that was in the amount of $84,960. We'd be able to award that. Then contract 2, alternate 1, would have been Meeting House Road. There are 10 homes on Meeting House Road that would be pump systems put in there, and the total value for that is $349,045. The total for all of these would have been $1,692,606, and that would have had a $258,000 amount remaining. Now, another thing to try to keep in mind here, because there are a couple of other items on some of these contracts, like slide gates for the treatment plant at $31 million, or rather $31,000. But these alternates have to be selected in the order in which they appear. All right? Therefore, you don't have the option of going down these 12 alternates for the treatment plant and saying, well, I want 8 and 6 and 10. You can't pick and choose what you want.
At
The
this
only way-
time, we're not including them, so why don't we
Right.
just move on to something else, please,
Okay.
Ray?
So that's the recommended contract award would be for option 1. But I have to point out, so that the board is aware, that this also means that the alternates for contract 3, the collection system south, alternate 2 and 3 were private roads for alternate 2, and the Brewster Road area for alternate 3, we would not be able to do them under that option. Once again, even if you just look at the values, you would not be able to do both of them, because the value would be over $3 million, and you only have $2 million available. It would be possible, theoretically, to substitute private roads for the second set of tanks at the plant. I do not recommend that, and that is not included in my recommendation. In my opinion, by far, the tankage at the plant is probably carrying the highest cost risk of anything in the contracts. Doing something in the collection system in the foreseeable future is relatively easy and cost-effective to do it. The plant, not so much. If you have to go digging up at that plant, and these tanks are connected to the building, all right? So if you have to go digging down 15 feet at the plant, start putting any future tanks in, you're gonna have to try to attach them to the other tanks because they have to be watertight. If they were all constructed right now, they would have divisions between them. One wall, all right, for 2 tanks, all right? If they're gonna be separate, you have to have an additional wall. So anyway, it carries the highest cost risk as an item that if we deferred it to the future, the cost would go through the roof to try to have it done. For what it's worth, we are looking at opportunities to be able to bring these back into the fold in the foreseeable future, meaning within the next year. So we have looked to the state under the state revolving fund program to try to approve funding in the amounts that would be able to facilitate the alternates on the contracts. Should that occur, we would be in a position where we would be able to negotiate what that would be with respect to the contractors. So that is where we are right now. And as I said, for recommendation purposes, the good thing is that you can award the base bids for all of the contracts. I was really worried that contract 3, being one of the bigger ones, would have had to have been sacrificed as part of the bid process, but that did not happen. So that is where we are at present. If you have any questions, if I'm not clear on something, I'd be happy to.
I had one question, Mr. Jack. Just so I'm clear, the second set of tanks that you mentioned, you were saying that these tanks would be much less expensive to put in now as opposed to later digging it back up and then adding them. But are these tanks that are tanks that the capacity will only be required in phase 2?
For the most part, yes. Yes.
So do we, is the option we have here considering saving ourselves money in the future? Or if we do so, will that limit collection? Will that decrease the amount of collection that we can achieve right now if we spend the extra money?
Oh, it would increase the amount of collection that we would be able to have.
Thank you.
Make it clear what you're saying is that tanks 31, 32, 41, and 42 are the objective for the future lines
Yes.
within the plant. And to build them now is considerably less expensive, even though they had to be put on as a alternative here.
Yes.
And if,
What is the probability that we can bring them in for less than $1.6 million?
At the present time?
Yeah.
And in the future, I don't think so. I really don't. Because the presumption when the contractors put these together, and kind of look at it this way, if you consider their sets of two to begin with, $911,000 for 2 tanks, and then right behind it, 1.5 for 4 tanks. Now, in theory, the 911 should have doubled, all right? But it was actually only 1.5 times as much because you're getting more work, all right? So it's a better bang for the buck. So the ultimate cost is actually less to put in the last 4 tanks than it normally would have been.
and spending that money on the extra tanks now, would that force us to sacrifice money used to attach more dwellings to the sewer system at this phase?
To attach more what?
More homes?
Collection.
Right, yes.
So we would have to, if we were to do this now, we wouldn't be able to sewer as many homes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
If we put these tanks in now, if we find a way, that opens us up to a phase 2. Without them, we don't have a phase 2, and a phase 2 gets more expensive without them.
Yes,
And it will take longer because they have to be reconstructed.
yes.
It's not something we want to do. We want 3-1 and 2, and 4-1 and 2 in the ground in the primary construction phase.
Yes.
We wanted that from the beginning, and somehow it got left out indirectly by putting it in the phasing. We've got to get this back in.
And even for the remaining tanks, the hope is that obviously now we're in a position to put 2 more tanks in, all right? But the remaining 4, that is part of what I mentioned we are trying to do over the next several months, is to obtain that money now while the contracts are going. The cost will be cheaper then than it ever will be to try to do it in the future. And that way we could handle this as well as the collection systems.
Is there any possibility of our being then eligible or applying for more ARPA funds to support the extra tanks?
I'm sorry.
Is there any chance that applying for additional ARPA funds that we've, in addition to what we've already gotten, might then help us to fund the tanks?
As far as just ARPA funds you're talking about?
Yeah, applying for additional ARPA funds.
Well, the town will need, even if we get the approval from the SRF program with respect to the project, because that was the stated purpose of the request, was to be able to complete the rest of this project as intended. So it's got a high approval rating, looking good for that with the state, but that does mean in the spring, then the town would have to appropriate. All right?
Okay.
So, but it wouldn't be too late to do anything about it. It wouldn't be too late to do anything about it at that point. Funding it would put us in a good position then.
I have an additional question, and this is on contract number 2, and what the reason was for adding in the Meeting House Road alternative. Alternate.
It's really a function of what's affordable. So you do want to try to, if you have, almost $2 million available, then you want to try to do as much as you can. And in contract 2, They were highlighted and listed as an alternate in there. So the presumption is that originally, yeah, that's what the town wants to do anyway. And the same thing with contract 3. There were roads down there, private roads and the Brewster Road area, that were identified as alternate roads in the contract, with the presumption that, yes, they're still what the town does want to do. They're within the sewer service area. So it's really a function of, you know, being able to afford to do what. So with the amount of money that would have been remaining with the tankage and the carbon scrubber for the main plant, then there was still sufficient money to be able to make that award on contract 2.
Okay, thank you.
And as I said, that's 10 homes there. I mean, I wish I was here today to say that we can do it all. Unfortunately, it's not the case. And it really boils down to, I think, trying to do the best we can with what we have, and being able to weigh that specifically when it comes to what's it going to cost to do it later. And that's
Well-
why my focus is clearly the plant.
The other overriding issue is the fact that we will not get every home in Mashpee.
Right.
It's not in the cards.
Right.
And if it means costing $500,000 to put in 1 mile of collection pipe for 10 houses, we're not going to do that either.
Right.
So chances are that meeting house question that keeps coming up, which I tried to kill 3 years ago, is just wasting our time. Can we get it off the subject?
Can you get it off of the what?
The subject of meetings. There is no need for it. Those 10 homes are not needed to be in the system. They never were needed. It was somebody's quote-unquote idea that would be a good idea. And it isn't a good idea, it wasn't a good idea, and it will never become a good idea.
Well, I'm not in a position to make a decision with respect to
Yes,
anything that was
but we
included
are
in
in
the
a
contract on that.
Position not to waste our time discussing something that with all probability will get left out because it is not an appropriate expenditure. The town needs to spend our money effectively.
I can only speak to what the town bid.
There are errors in all our documents. So do we have any summaries by our engineering group on what they've been doing and what's happening? I'm sorry, yeah, I assume you've finished your
No,
site.
I'm done. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
He wanted to know if anyone would like to speak.
No, we agree. We agree with the recommendations that Mr. Jack put forward.
Everybody's happy in the engineering room.
Happy is a funny word.
No suggestions on how to save $1.5 million so we can do the job right to begin with?
Unfortunately, the way that
You have
the-
to-
And please introduce yourself for the record.
Mike Scipio. Mike Scipione, Weston and Sampson. Unfortunately, based on the way that the bids are received and the way the law is required to take alternates, you have a limited number of options that you can really do. And what we all did was look carefully at it to find out which way was in the best interest of the town to move forward, spending the appropriate amount of funds and being able to award the contract so you have a real project going forward.
Can I add something? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to just, I've been in front of this board before. Joe, we've seen you a lot. There's a lot of new faces here, but I've been through not as long as some people, but a while. And I have to applaud your predecessors and you, Joe, and Meredith, you too, that you opened up to doing alternates. It's hard to see these alternates. You're like, of course we have to do this. Of course we have to do that. We agree. But in talking with the contractors out there, there's many of them that have put in bids only to have the project just go away because the towns don't have the money. Because you embraced the alternates and went with it, you actually have 3 viable projects that you can award. And I want to award this group, applaud this group for following through with that and supporting it throughout the design. It protected your $54 million. And I can answer any questions you want, but that's all I wanted to say.
I was finished.
Any questions on the board?
I have
Meredith?
another question. I understand the process, and thank you for the information you presented. It's so clear. What are the consequences of not doing all the alternates at this time?
Not doing any of them?
No. The ones that you're recommending, yes, I'm not disputing that. The other 10 on contract 1 and the other 2 on contract 3, are there any consequences of not doing them at this time?
Well,
I mean, we can't afford them, obviously.
right. For contract 3, is probably the biggest impact is contract 3, more so than the plant. For the plant, I would love to go with alternate 3, all right, as well. Beyond that, the rest of them are not that important.
Okay.
But for contract 3, those specific roads, you're looking at Brewster, Harwich, Truro, Chatham, Strawberry, in a core group, okay, that had a lift station associated with it on Brewster Road. Because of that lift station, that's one of the reasons why, even though it's a limited number of streets, the cost is fairly high at $2.5 million. But then the other streets, the private roads, they're ancillary streets off of some of the main roads, okay? So you have Egret, Antunes, I think Pine, Christopher Lane, Rainbow. Those are some of the roads that would not be getting a sewer connection under the contract at the present time, all right? But I do believe strongly that one way or the other, that we will be able to get something done there while these contracts are going on and be able to finish those.
Thank you.
Can I add a little?
Sure, please do.
Again, Sandy Tripp, I'll look more at the plant, Ray, if that's okay. A lot of these things that are alternates, for example, 8, painting. How can you not paint? Well, you can hire a painter later to go in. These can all be done after the fact. Laboratory equipment, it's a small amount because you don't need a lot right now, but you can obtain those later. You can get an equipment shed later. These are all things that can be added in after your plant's up and running when you can find the money. That's why they were broken out in the first place. So those are relatively small. It's a lot of money, but it's relatively small compared to the tanks. So you do have a lot of flexibility in that part of it.
Thank you. And I just have one more question. In the agreements that we were handed out, and it just states that the engineer on all 3 contracts is GHD. I thought that for contract 1, it was GHD, and for contracts 2 and 3, it was going to be EP.
Should say that.
Contract 1 is GHD. They were the designer, and they will serve as construction administration firm. All right, so they'll be overseeing the contract, along with, bless you, along with the OPM, or owner's project manager, which is Weston and Sampson. That is a requirement of state law, that when you have a project that's over $10 million of this magnitude and it's vertical construction, it mandates that you have an OPM. So their job specifically for Weston and Sampson is to represent the town's interests, all right? And then thirdly, you have environmental partners, who is going to serve construction administration for the collection system contracts, all right? So they were already designed, but they will be serving construction administration oversight.
Okay, but
On
they don't
those.
need to have their name on the agreement that are going to be filled in and signed.
I'm sorry?
They don't need to have, the other names don't have to be on these agreements.
No,
Okay,
no.
thank you.
Okay, that's it? Any other questions?
I have one small question.
Yes, please.
Who is responsible for the first submitting and then overseeing the NPDES permit for construction activities?
Who oversees
The
the perm?
stormwater.
That will, well, the contractor's required to submit their stormwater plan.
contractor,
Yes, they have to submit it. They're aware of all of the federal requirements on that because it usually requires a discharge permit.
But the oversight team will still be, okay.
Yeah, we watch over that. They have to submit that plan to our engineers, all right? So, and they too know what works and what doesn't. So, yep.
Okay. Meredith, you sent the commission a letter of questions that I forwarded back to everybody with an answer on it, that you asked what the study about facility capacity was ever done. The reason why the volume for Phase 1 was what it is, it was designed to be fundable so that the town could generate and ask for and get state funds to get started. It was not a solution to the entire process, but rather a startup. The example of it is we're looking for these extra tanks so we can do Phase 2 and Phase 3 potentially, and/or expand the facility. The whole issue there is we're only going to be able to process 120,000 gallons a day, which is about 450 to 480 connections. We're going to have to make, in the long term here, some 3,000 to 4,000 collection points. All right, so it's going to be multiple times that.
Yeah.
We have to expand this plant to its capacity. We have to take into consideration something on the western side of town for that estuary that may require us building a facility or working with anything that it develops at the base.
Well, Joe, excuse me for interrupting, but my question was specifically about the groundwater infiltration test that was supposed to have been done, and it was to quantify the amount of the wastewater effluent that could safely be discarded at the facility, and it was $80,000 that was approved. I was just wondering whether or not the testing had been done or whether that's still in the works.
Would you like me to answer that, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman? Yeah. The funding is available. You're right, it was appropriated at town meeting. We have not gone into that yet. It's not for the plant specifically, it's for the discharge of the plant.
Okay.
All right, so it has to do with the site with the infiltration basins. And they were currently permitted at a flow rate of 7 gallons per square foot per day. And the goal would be to try, which I think equals 360 or 390,000 gallons a day as a discharge permit. The goal was to try to increase that perk rate, all right, the application rate, to something higher than 7 gallons, which is possible. And the goal was to try to do that in order to get a higher limit on our discharge permit. For what it's worth, there's no real urgency to that at this point. The plant capacity and the discharge capacity for basins is more than sufficient at the present time. But for future flows, it would definitely be necessary. But I will say this too, that usually the best application is once the plant is actually running. That's when you know if all the theories worked, all right, because you're applying wastewater to the ground. It's either going to work or as it was supposed to, or it's not. So usually that's one of the better times to do that. Can it be done? Yes, but at the present time, but it would be a theoretical application if it was.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll be monitoring that closely and looking at it as we move through this, but it's not forgotten.
So does that mean we've got an extra $80,000 that we can spend on something else?
No, no, unfortunately.
Too bad.
Good thought, though.
To give you some indication that other existing facilities have a much higher penetration rate allowed through historical background and testing by the state. The state told me approximately 5 years ago when this whole issue came up that they would go with the minimum quantity, which is what they represented with this 7 gallons?
7 gallons.
7 gallons was just to get us started, and then when we're using actual output, they will measure it. And it's not unusual for the state to allow it as high as 10 or 12 even, or even higher. Maybe you know some specific applications.
I think one was modeled at 20.
Okay. So it would appear, quote unquote, and Chris had a study done of the area to see that it wouldn't mound improperly. It would appear that this is a secure point, that we're going to not have problems with it. If we don't have to spend the $80,000 in the end, we'll use it for something else, yes.
I assume so.
But it's got to stay there until that issue is solved.
Okay. And then just one final question. All of the engineering firms in the past had presented some thought about sludge disposal, and I didn't see it mentioned at all. And I was wondering where we are with that.
For the sludge disposal is going to increase with the plant processing capacity. So the higher the processing capacity goes, the more sludge is going to be generated for removal. For the present capacity, meaning 120,000 gallons a day, and it may take more than that, it may go up to 240, where it would still be cost effective to have it hauled in a liquid form, all right, and taken to a disposal facility. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the generated volume was going to be somewhere in the range of 10,000 gallons for each haul. But nonetheless, for the future then, the town's going to have to start thinking about whether it wants to make it a more solid product, meaning literally you have to dewater it in order to make it more movable. In the final stage of sludge management, you literally create what we call in the industry sludge cakes, all right? So it's heavily dewatered, and that can actually be loaded onto trucks, all right? But the town is going to have to do something like that as the system starts to expand. There's no getting away from it, because otherwise the storage capacity would have to have on-site for liquid sludge for that amount of wastewater would be unreasonable and unwieldy and costly.
Thank you.
I do have a question. Excuse me, I have a question about the sludge removal. So we are planning on hauling the sludge. Do we have a contract with somebody to receive this? And if we do, how long is that contract good for?
All of those things are something that you really can't do in advance. I mean, I do know that there was at least several inquiries made, one of them being in Bridgewater, but not so much for contractual purposes, only for being able to facilitate the ultimate disposal. But during the course of the construction, yes, those are decisions that you are going to have to make when it's presented to you as to what those cost options are and which facilities. They will have to be contracts, yes.
You had another question that was about the AARPA funds. I guess the answer to that is any of the funds that we've been able to designate for wastewater projects, we do, and we will continue to do that.
Yes, and I felt that question about the $54 million and how it was designated has been answered sufficiently. It's been answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you asked if 54 million is designed to phase one, is there a price estimate for completion? Or is it too soon to ask? It may be too soon to ask, but this entire plan was very carefully laid out back 15 years ago. And at that time, it would appear that with shellfish, the town could end up spending as much as $140 million in sewer collection and processing. And without shellfish, it was estimated to be $240 million.
Yes.
So I think that's the only answer we can say. We do not know what the entire cost will be, and we do not know how much of the town will have to be sewered. We've got to get started. We've got to monitor our estuaries, and as the nitrogen levels begin to drop in the estuaries, we'll begin to understand how much more sewerage we'll have to collect and process. There's approximately 90,000 pounds of nitrogen floating around here, more than there was 25 years ago. That's what we've got to get rid of, because that's what's killing us, all right? It's a lot. Every individual in this town contributes somewhere around 9 pounds of nitrogen on an annual basis. So if you want to know where all our troubles are coming from, they're people. If we got rid of people, we wouldn't need all this, okay? Now, the problem is undefinable as to how much, because we have so many players. We have private processors that have all sorts of different levels of cleanliness. The town, it all depends on how much money we can get, how fast we can expand. The issue of wastewater is just something that has to be worked through. We cannot be absolute in the definition of how much we're going to spend. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be at least double this 54 million. I can tell you that from an old engineer's guess. And the 140 may not be a bad estimate, even though it was made 15 years ago. So, who's the sewer commission select board liaison? Well, we just found out that
We don't have one yet.
John Cotton is not, there's no one appointed as of yet.
We need to make a request, do we not, of the,
We can make it. Someone want to make a request?
do we make the request of the select board to nominate someone, or do we?
Yes.
I would motion that we request the select board nominate a liaison amongst themselves to the sewer commission.
Any second?
Second.
Second? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Okay. The issue of the continuing expansion of the site. Once we get beyond this $54 million expenditure, there's going to be open space and hopefully open tanks at this transfer station site. So my question, as before, is how soon, or rather, how do we go about making, at this time, the right plans to fire up the second, third, and fourth processing lines within this plant? And the companion article to that is this building going to be adequate for what we have to run through it? This was just developed as a starting point, and that's the way it's been financed. We're on our way. We're going to get started within the next 18 months in processing, but then we're going to have to double and double again the amount of liquid going through that site. So how do we go about this from an engineering point of view? This is phase 2 and potentially phase 3 or phase 4, however you want to start characterizing it.
The plant is not and would not carry that load. In my view, with a modified phase 2, and when I say modified, and I could show it on the screen, but if you look at the area around John's and Ashima Pond, sewering that area, that was included in the original phase 2. That's over 230,000 gallons in flow. There goes roughly 50% of the plant's capacity on that area, geographic area alone. However, under the original phase 2, that area wasn't intended to go to the plant. It was actually designed to go to Joint Base Cape Cod, and or a second plant in that geographic area up on the back road site, which makes sense too. So for my purposes, I kind of looked at town and split it down the middle. You have an east and a west. And from an east-west perspective, with what this commission had presented to the Board of Selectmen last year on a modified Phase 2, that modified Phase 2 works very well with the existing plant that we're building now. And I do believe that virtually all of that flow from that plan would be able to be accommodated at the plant. But that's the Phase 2A through E/2A through F scenario. And as I said, I do have that on slides if you want me to run through that.
Well, we almost ought to make the definition east and west as part of these conversations, because that's what it amounts to. We still have the greater concentration of population, toilets, there our game, on the east side of the watersheds, okay? The eastern watershed, and that's why it's at the transfer station, it's a central location. So if we run line 2, 3, and 4 in that facility, we should be able to get up to over 400,000 gallons a day.
Right.
That should make a significant impact in the Mashpee River. And in doing so, we'll be reaching towards our legal requirements of changing the pollution in the environment.
Yes.
The other side, that's manana. That's not stage 2, which should never be considered in phase 2. We can't get there until we've got the first side done. And we made that commitment to just concentrate on the east side. And then all of a sudden, someone invented a phase 2 that included half of the west side. We don't want the west side. It's not going to go through the transfer station. We have to come up with an alternative there, either ourselves or joint base or something else. You know, it's not on the table.
Yes.
Any other questions? So the phase 2 collection areas that you've proposed now are strictly for the transfer station, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the selectmen understand that? No? Yes? Come on, John.
So actually, I would like some clarification. So I understand 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E. You mentioned 2F.
Yes.
Where's F?
Sandalwood.
Okay. That's not on one of the maps that I got, so
No.
I don't know where F was.
Right. What you may have seen is 2A through E, right? When I evaluated the phases as they were proposed in 2015 versus what was being proposed last year with the Sewer Commission and the board, it also included 2E, which was the western portion. So where I was looking at it was that doesn't happen. Half of 2D gets cut off because that was up on Santua Pond on the eastern side, all right? But it included a lot of sandwich in it. This restricts it back to the Mashpee component of that for Santuit. And then 2E was originally in phase 2, all right? So it's being carried forward in phase 2. Why? Because if there's any single place that has the largest impact on the Mashpee River, that's it. They're right there, right next to it, further up the reaches of it, and the discharge effect is virtually immediate. So
So I just want, and again, my personal opinion, so I'm not here as the liaison, as we were very, clearly stated. The other clarification I would like, and it doesn't have to be done at this meeting now, but if there's a shortfall that is required for the plant to add phase 1, or to have the capacity to handle phase 1 and phase 2 at a lower cost now, I would really like to see what that would be.
Yes.
You understand what I'm?
Oh, yes,
And,
yes.
and again, everyone was kind of dancing around that same question, because if we're just that close, and, we can do it for $1 million now, or we can do it in 4 years for $2 million, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so that I would be very curious to see, and I'd be very happy to, consider that and bring that to the board. But again, as one single select person, not as a liaison.
Right.
So beyond that, thank you.
I think what you just said is we want the alternate 3 processing tanks in the ground. Got it.
Right. Yes.
Sure.
Ray Jack, are you going to be able to do the presentation to us again today?
Am I able to?
Do the presentation that you were going to present of Phase 2, modified as you just spoke about?
The design.
Oh, as far as present it?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Did you want to?
yes. I think it would be good for clarification for
I agree.
everybody, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
Meredith's asking if to present the Phase 2A through E, F areas on the screen.
What he handed out.
Can you just give a list of how many homes are in them? How many units we're gonna have to attach in those areas?
I don't have that information, no.
That's what we need. That's more critical than painting pretty pictures for us. What we
Okay.
need is a pretty picture with a value in it. The
Easy.
value is the number of potential connections,
Sure.
the housing, and that's copyable right off the street listings. The street listings give you the number of houses on each street.
Okay.
And if we need someone to sit down, I can sit down some afternoon and do some streets myself, but we need to know that on the sections called 2A, Pirates Cove down there. Okay, how many houses are in there? No one's answered that question for me yet. Do I have to count them myself?
I'll give the numbers to you, yes.
Okay. 2B, 2C, 2A, and 2F is interesting because they've got a broken down system that we'll probably have to take over anyway. Great. So we didn't have any correspondence this week. Does anyone else have any questions?
Okay, I'm a little confused here. We've got none of these have been awarded, correct? They have or have not been, they have not been awarded. So to get the show off the road, we got to award something. And it sounds like we have a disagreement on the meeting house alternative that you were suggesting.
We can just leave that out as we proceed to put the roads in, the connecting lines. That's just an issue of do we run a pipe down Meeting House or not? That doesn't have to be part of this contract. We just tell the installer, don't put it in or put it in, whatever the decision is.
My question is, why at this late date are we changing horses in midstream? Why did at one time did we think Meeting House Road was important and now it isn't? And I'm just curious.
Because an individual who shall remain unnamed told the person that was doing the engineering collection that he wanted a pipe down that road. I was there when he did it. And I looked at it and said, that doesn't make any sense. And I've held that position ever since. And it got incorporated. That's why it's there. And that's why I brought it up again, because I'm still steamed about it.
It's a cost-benefit thing, the
There's no
amount of money
cost
to be
benefit,
spent
unfortunately.
for a few houses.
You know, my house may never be sewered. Why? Because I'm way down at the one end of the town. I'm downhill from everything, you know? That's the way it's gonna be. There are portions in this town that are not gonna get sewered. And that's potentially one of them, because there's no cost benefit for the town to go in and put a sewer of $500,000 worth of pipe in the ground for 10 houses. It's not worth it. So it's not an issue, I don't think.
So,
Catherine?
so what is the process for changing the contract and the bid?
The individual that's running it can, at will, drop out reasonable things. He's hired as an engineer to make those decisions for us.
It's an alternate option, so we simply,
Well, I'm just trying to understand the
yeah.
process.
As I understand, it's, any of these alternates are just like when you're ordering a new car, what options you want.
My presumption is this. Everything that hit the streets as far as the bids went was this board. Granted, there are new members to the board, but from a predecessor perspective, all of these alternates were done and approved as such by the board, by the commission. I'm not in a position to just remove that one because I don't know the context in which any of this was put into the contracts. I was not here for any of the selection process. Based on dollar values and value engineering with respect to recommendations, you have mine. If the commission chooses something other than that, then that is for the commission to decide. So I guess my point is that at this point, the question becomes either you agree with as recommended or not, and if not, what?
So to recap, could you summarize quickly, because you've already said it, just so we're all clear, on each of the three contracts, which alternates you are absolutely recommending? Because I'm going to go down the list and just check each one, and then we're all very clear.
Starting with the first one, which is contract one, that's the wastewater plant. And as I said, do keep in mind, there may be a list of alternates, but they must go in order as far as selection purposes. So for my purposes, it would have been alternate one, which is the carbon scrubber, $267,000. Alternate two, process tanks 2.1 and 2.2 for $911,000. We cannot afford to do alternate three, which is the process tanks, the remaining 4 tanks, at a cost of $1.597 million. We do not have the funding for that. Of the remaining funding for contract two, it would be awarding alternate one, which is the only alternate under that contract for a Meeting House Road, for $349,045. And then for contract three, it would be awarding the base bid, and there were 5 alternates listed. Alternate one, wet well coating would have been the only one for $84,960. So that's what was recommended.
And you are recommending the alternate one on Meeting House Road?
Yes.
Sandy, could you give me a definition of why we need Meeting House Road?
A what?
Sandy knows the layout of the roads. Meeting House is here and the other road's there. And we have a continuous pipe running north and south without Meeting House Road.
The Meeting House Road homes, and I believe there are 10,
Yeah.
are low-pressure pumps. So they will operate irrespective of gravity system. They will have a single discharge pipe, usually 2-inch, in the street. Each house is 1.25 inches. Each house has a pump system, pumps into that main drops into a gravity main. That's how that was designed.
And why is,
Why are we collecting each house for $35,000 a house?
why is to spend that money to sewer 10 houses, why is it important to us to do that if we're going to dedicate those funds for only 10 houses?
Well, from my perspective, my goal and role on this is to try to get as much as possible. That's what the numbers represent. So was there sufficient amount of funding left over to be able to incorporate something like that? The answer is yes. All right. So that's why it's there in that regard. However, as I said, I was not here for how this thing was put together. And with respect to, my presumption is simple, that everything on there regardless of what the alternates were, is what the town would have done if they didn't have to put them in as alternates. Meaning, if you just put a plant project together and a collection project together, what would it look like? It would have looked like that with Old Meeting House. Decisions would have been made on the collection system. They would have to have been made as to what's in, what's not, who is, who isn't. And that was not for me. In a future project, absolutely. I would take responsibility for that. But on this one,
On the Meeting House Road, the $350,000. Let's take that, put it towards the tanks, 3-1, 3-2, 4-1, 4-2. Now we're down to only a little over $1 million. Actually, we could sneak it in if we didn't have Meeting House Road. That's sufficient.
that's your choice.
We need the tanks. We don't need to collect from 10 houses.
And that's perfectly fine. As I said, leaving here today, I just
Yeah.
need some guidance on what we're going to award.
Yeah. Well, could we make a motion that what we do is we drop alternate 1 in contract 2 and reserve those funds, $350,000, to get us closer to being able to afford the alternate 3 in contract 1, the 3-1, 3-2, 4-1, and 4-2 tanks.
So I think really what you're saying is that you want to do option 3 plus alternate 3. In other words, this one on the bottom is,
Up at the top, which is what I'm talking about.
yeah,
What's it now? He's talking about the summary option 3, bottom right in gray.
I'm
There's a
saying this,
3.4.
this right here is this less Meeting House. This here is this less Meeting House. And it gives you this much money left, plus you're gonna need a little more to do the other.
All I did was spell it out according to this definition here and here instead of down there. I said remove alternate 1 in contract 2. That's the Meeting House Road portion, $350,000. Reserve those funds for the purchase of alternate 3, the processing tanks. I
Does-
made that in the form of a motion. Can anybody second it?
I'll second it.
Catherine? Any discussion? Ray or Sandy or Paul?
So what we're voting on here is contract 1 with alternate 1 carbon scrubber, alternate and 2 process tanks 2.1 and 2.2. Contract 2, base bid only, no alternate. And contract 3, with the alternate 1, the wet well coating.
Yes,
All right.
sounds like, but we're not voting on that, we're gonna vote on
Oh, just the,
just dropping the alternate 1 in contract 2.
Oh,
we have a second, or?
just got a second.
Yeah, I propose we drop alternate 1 from contract 2, reserving those funds.
All right, then Catherine made the motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion?
Just a clarification, so we're voting on contract 1, base bid plus alternate 1, alternate 2, alternate 3.
Can't do that, we don't have enough money for alternate 3. Let's stick with what the motion is.
The motion is just for
Motion
contract.
is
One
to
and two.
save money in
Okay.
contract 2 and save it and apply it towards alternate 3 when Ray figures out where he's gonna get the other million. And then we can get our tanks.
Yeah, Meredith, what he's doing is he's taking the option 1 that Ray had suggested, and he's taking out Meeting House Road.
Yes, I understand.
Which ends up as option 3.
Yes.
Okay. We're clear?
Any further discussion?
No.
Engineering comments at all? Okay. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Can we go ahead and vote on these contract 1 and 3 as well?
I'm not sure he requires that. That's the function of the select board to vote on the acceptance of the contract as presented by the town manager and the engineering
Yeah.
group. For those of you who are not aware of it, the public state of Massachusetts has created the situation where all of the bidders have to be pre-qualified, and all of the contractors have to submit immense amounts of paperwork confirming that they're good people and they don't cheat, and they finish their contracts and all those other things, and they get a scorecard, and that scorecard provides you the top-rated, quote-unquote, people. And we, with the exception of costs, we have to go along with them. So the choice of Waterline versus some of the other people, and there were some other good people, Daniel O'Connor, for example, he comes out of my past, I remember him. And other contractors were also there. Can you explain to me why Waterline specifically got the contract? What was unique about them?
They were low bid. They were fully qualified.
Yep.
They were responsive and responsible, and they were the low bidder.
Okay.
All three of them were considered responsible and responsive. So then it becomes a low bid situation.
So that's the nature of it. We do not make the decision. The town doesn't make the decision. In fact, the state is making the decision for us, that these are responsible contractors and they are low bidders.
Right.
So any other questions on the contracts?
Ray, do you feel comfortable?
I'm sorry?
Do you feel comfortable with the guidance that you've been given?
The contractors?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're very good contractors. Yeah. They're very experienced.
Any other things that we should be talking about today? There's no correspondence. We spoke to the public.
I'd like to, before I get to the minutes, I'd like us to come back to Ray Jack's Phase 2 collection areas. And you, Joe, you requested that Ray Jack come back with streets and cost. Can we revisit this on a subsequent meeting and have you come back with the new plan so that we'd be able to make a motion about moving it forward? Because I think the longer we wait for moving another phase forward, the longer it will take. So is that possible for you to do?
Sure.
Okay.
That's it.
I would,
Catherine.
did we, I don't recall that we approved the meeting minutes from last time,
Oh,
from
no.
August 4th.
We did
Yes, we
not.
didn't. Discussion and approval of August 4th minutes that were kindly prepared for us and left. I did receive this by email a couple of days ago, and I read through it. I didn't see anything. Anybody got any issues?
No, I move that we accept the minutes from August 4th.
Second.
Made. Favored. Susan, is this what you wanted us to do?
Yeah, please.
Nothing else?
I inadvertently omitted the discussion about who will be taking over chair. It was agreed at the last meeting that it would stay on the agenda until it was done, but I
Okay.
omitted it from the agenda. We
Well-
can continue with it as other items not reasonably anticipated by chair, I believe.
Why don't we just put that down as old business and take it up next month, or next
That's fine.
The next meeting is, does anyone have a calendar?
No.
Is it September 8th? I think it's September 8th.
September 8th.
Yes, September 8th at 2 o'clock.
September 8th. Okay. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll be happy to second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ray Jack.